one of the fears I think that a lot of us have is that we're alone, and we don't want that to be confirmed. I feel alone, I think I'm alone, and something's going to happen that's going to confirm that. Welcome to the Mighty Oak Show today. Glad to have you with us wherever it is you are listening or watching from. Thank you for joining us. Looking forward to a great conversation today. Before we jump in, though, I want to remind you, as I do every single week, if you are listening and not watching, when you get done listening, go watch. If you're listening at Mojo 50, thank you for doing that. Very grateful for our relationship there. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, again, thank you for listening. But when this episode is finished, take time to go over to YouTube. You can find the Mighty Oaks channel there. Just search for Mighty Oaks Foundation or Mighty Oaks Warrior Programs. You'll find our channel. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and that will let you know when more content comes online. And I'm thankful for what we've been able to do there and what we continue to do. This show is there, of course. All of our interviews and all of the shows for the last couple of years are there. You can see the video there. But beyond that, we have testimonial videos and other helps and resources for you. Take some time to go and check those out. Also on YouTube, that is a great place for you to share this content with others. And maybe you're being helped by this, and I hope that you are. But perhaps you know someone else that needs to hear this conversation or other conversations that we've had, some of the testimonials, some of the other resources. Share that out with folks that you know. And that would be great. That's why we produce the content that we do. It really is just to be a help to you, and I hope that it is. So again, thank you for joining us and for following along. Today's conversation is really a few things. It's an update. We want to update you, our audience, on our programs. We do this from time to time, and we have the opportunity to do that today. And then beyond that, we're going to talk about really helping women who are dealing with many of the issues that we talk about on this show. We talk about trauma for those who have served or are serving, or being married to, as a spouse, those who have served or are serving. So many different aspects of that. We're going to talk about that today. Our guest today, my guest today, is my lovely wife, Susanne. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you here again. Susanne has been on the show a number of times. I'm not laughing because you're here, just because you said thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked and then begged, and then you said yes. So I appreciate you coming on. We've had Susanne on several times in the past, both in this format where you and I have talked, but we've had the women's team on and other conversations about our women's program. But such an important topic for us, and organizationally, this is something that we talk about a lot, is serving or ministering to women, both those who have served, those who are serving, and those who are married to those who have served. And it's a complicated area of ministry or service for us. It's one that's been honestly difficult for us to understand how best to engage with that, and we're in a great place now, and some really amazing things have happened over the last several years of doing this. And you just finished a program last week, so I want to jump into some specifics about helping women who are dealing with some of the issues that we talk about. But before we do, give us an update. Where is the women's program coming out of COVID last year? We've been able to have programs. Things have been challenging, of course, but we're back on track. Maybe talk about where we are broadly, but then specifically to last week's program, some good things that came out of that.
I kind of feel like where we are broadly is people are just so much wanting to be with people.
Right.
So what we've seen,
Right.
especially during the programs that we've been able to have in person since some of the COVID shutdowns and those things, is at least on the women's side, is just craving time with each other and craving relationships. And this last session was no different, and we had a full session. We haven't really seen a lot of kind of last minute drops. Sometimes we see people at the last minute, they kind of get afraid, they don't want to come, or for maybe there's a family reason that they can't attend. But it really seems like overall, our last few programs have been full or even close to full because people are just so wanting to be with others, and they're so desperately wanting that help. And last week's program, like I said, was no different. We had a full class of 25 ladies, and overall there was just a desire for hope. When the ladies came, they really, like every session, they come with so many different things that they're carrying, and maybe the reasons that they sign up to attend a program is the same. They're all looking for something, but I would say last week overall, it was just they were looking for hope, and for some of them, this was kind of the last thing that they were going to do before they were going to give up on a relationship, or give up, really altogether. In life. And so that was no different last week. It's just people wanting to be together, wanting that community, looking for relationships with other women, looking for that closeness, but overall just looking for that hope in their life to get back on track.
When people sign up for programs, this happens in all of our programs. They sign up for programs. Sometimes they're coerced into it. Sometimes a spouse even will sign up for them or something like that. When someone signs up for a program, they're interested in attending, maybe they're even excited about it, and they drop out at the last minute. What are some of the reasons that someone would say, I'm just not going to follow through on this? Our programs are paid for. Transportation is paid for, so there's no financial obligation that they can't meet, perhaps. What are some of the reasons someone would back out of a program like this at the last minute?
I mean, there's some actual reasons. Maybe childcare fell through, and we've had that happen quite a bit, especially on the women's side. Childcare fall through is kind of one of the bigger reasons. But I would say most of the time it's because maybe they're afraid. They don't know what to expect. They know that they're coming together with women that they don't know, and sometimes there can be a lot of fear in that.
Yeah.
And even just maybe knowing that they're going to have to confront some things, or maybe deal with some things that they've never had to deal with before. And there's a lot of fear that comes with that.
Yeah. And I think fear is probably the thing that prevents people from really getting the help that they need. If someone were to call you and say, I've reconsidered, it's Saturday, the program starts on Monday, I'm not going to get on the plane, I'm not coming. Most of the time they just don't. They don't call first. But if you were on that phone call, what would you tell that person to help them kind of bridge how they're feeling and what they're thinking to get them to the place where they can get the hope they need? How do you help them transition through that?
It's really a mindset, and it's just, I think, for them understanding that they are not the only one that's feeling like that right now, and even connecting with them on the point that really everyone on our leadership team has been through the same experience, and that we all felt that way as well. And just communicating that to them and making them not feel so alone in that, because a lot of times, they feel they're traveling alone, they feel like they're coming alone. This is their experience, and while that's true, they're coming to a place where they're not alone in feeling that fear, that uncertainty, because everyone there is feeling that way right now. I mean, the 20 some other students that are there are feeling the exact same way. And then everyone on our leadership team totally understands what it feels like to be that way as well. So really just trying to connect that to that feeling of uncertainty and fear is there, and it's true, and that's totally valid. But also I think getting them to the point where they understand that they're not alone in that. They never have been alone in that. They're not alone in that now. And just having that mindset of that, not that loneliness that comes with that feeling, that really goes a long way. And we have had women do that. We have had women call someone, or, we found out someone dropped, we call them, find out why, and are able to let them know, hey, that's okay. It's okay to feel like that, but just take the step to get on the plane and come, and you'll realize that that's not the case.
Yeah, I think so many people have the opportunity to get help. Men and women, couples, families, they have the opportunity to get help. There are organizations, institutions, resources available to them. But when they get right up to it, there is that fear that creeps in, and that fear prevents them from taking the next step and getting the help that they need. And sometimes it's almost, you almost need to go back and say, help me to understand why you decided to go to our website, why you decided to fill out the application or seek the help. In a church setting, maybe it's, why did you decide to come here? Well, what was the motivation for you then? Or if someone reaches out to a counselor, what is it that caused you to make that phone call? And going back to that and saying, what was that? And reminding them perhaps that there was a problem that allowed or led to that. And it's always interesting for us on this side, I think, knowing that if they will get here, it's not going to be what they think. It's not going to be as bad as they think. But B, we know the help is available. And all they have to do is come and sit down and just be a part of the process, and they'll find that help. And man, it's so discouraging knowing that someone is so close and then they'll back out of that.
Yeah, and we've had ladies come to our program after having maybe dropped out the time before, or they put in the application a year ago, and there's been opportunity for them to come, and they either backed out or they said, it's not the right time, and then they do come to us, and they always say, every single time, I wish I had come that first time, or I wish I had worked a little bit harder to make it happen. And so it is, it's true. We just know, but the person also has to be in the right place, and so that's, timing is everything in that too. So it's knowing that if someone does drop at the last minute, knowing that, maybe the time wasn't right for them, and they'll be coming, or they'll be able to come when it is the right time for them to be able to hear all those things. Yeah,
that's good. You said that a lot of the ladies this last week expressed the desire for hope. They need hope. They lacked hope. When you talk about hope, what exactly is it that you're talking about when they come to a place where they need to find hope? And this is the place that you can find that. What is that hope? How do you help them connect to that?
I think hope can mean different things for different people. Some people hope that, the relationship will work out, or life will kind of fall back in line. And we know what that hope is for them. And of course, we communicate the message of faith in Christ and having a relationship with Him. Because of that, faith that we place in Him, and that's what we're communicating to them, is finding hope in that. And I think most of the time when people are coming to us, they don't really know what they're looking for, but they do have, the hope is there that I will find something that will help me in my relationship, that will help me in life, whatever that situation is for them. And so they are just looking for some answers that will help them to be able to figure out life and how to live and how to move forward. But the message of hope that we're communicating to them is just that.
Getting together is something else that you mentioned is so important to people right now, and the desire to be together. We have attempted to have programs that were virtual. Last year, everything was virtual, and for a lot of reasons, we had to do a few programs that way. And the help can be offered, even the hope can be offered, but that connection is such an essential element for people. Can you talk about how important that is? Just being in the same room, being in the same space, being able to put your arm around someone, or cry with someone, or be happy with someone, whatever it is. How important is that connection, the physical connection, to the hope and the process of moving forward?
We did have one virtual session last year on the women's side. That was last summer, and the ladies that attended that were really happy about that. And we actually had a really good turnout for that virtual session. I know the men had some as well that had great turnouts. At the beginning of this year, we did have to cancel one of our women's program sessions. We were going to do it virtually, and we did attempt to do that. We let all the ladies know, hey, we're going to move to this virtual session, and not one single person wanted to do virtual.
Just tired of Zoom.
Really, they were just done looking at faces on a screen, and all of them said, we want to wait until we can come to an in-person session. And so most of those ladies that were supposed to come in February are the ones that were there in April, and then some of them in June as well at our women's program sessions. And so I would say that just after you haven't been with people in a while, like physically, face to face, it becomes so much more important. And I feel like people value it so much more, and just the value of being face to face with someone and seeing really facial expressions and, like you said, a hug or putting your arm around someone communicates so much. Care communicates so much. Really, I'm there with you. I'm not just telling you that I'm there with you and I'm walking alongside you and I'm coming alongside you to help you through this, but I'm actually standing here next to you and I'm willing to sit here with you and have this conversation, or come alongside you and put my arm around you and pray with you and really have this face-to-face conversation with you is so valuable. And I feel like people realize that now more than they ever have before.
We were made as humans to have connection with other humans and to be around other people. One of the fears I think that a lot of us have is that we're alone, and we don't want that to be confirmed. I feel alone, I think I'm alone, and something's going to happen that's going to confirm that. When you are in the same space as other people, particularly other people that have a similar story, maybe not exactly yours, but a similar story, similar background, and they found hope and they have found healing and direction and purpose, that fear of I'm alone is confronted and dispelled. You can't do that on the other side of a computer screen.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be in the same place with someone else who can deal with you.
Yeah, and it's so true. When we had the virtual session last July, we did give those ladies the option, if you attend a virtual session, then you can come to the next in-person session that you're available for. And so we had some of those ladies come to the program session we had in September. And that's kind of what they all voiced is, it's so nice to actually be with the ladies versus, all the information was communicated through the virtual session and it was great. But to actually be in person, and some of the leaders that participated in the virtual session were at the in-person session in September, and just to be able to be with them in person really was so much, and it really was so much more, maybe more helpful than the virtual one because of that, because you're actually there with someone and you don't feel so alone in that. The people that are telling you the things are actually there with you as well, and really in every way coming alongside you and really living out the things that they're communicating to you.
I think it's also important to have real life people sitting across the table from you or in the chair next to you to even confront some of the lies that you tell yourself. It's one thing to hear a class taught or even to read a book or listen to a podcast. We provide so many resources through Mighty Oaks even, and a big part of that is we can't get everyone to come to our program. But in a perfect world, we would have every single person that is eligible to attend our program come to our program and not provide these resources, because having the ability to sit next to someone and have them say, what you're telling yourself is just not true. I know you feel like it's true, it feels very real, and it is very real to you, but you're not alone. You're not the only one who's experienced this. It's not hopeless. There is a path forward. We sometimes need people kind of in our face almost, and it's not that aggressive, but face to face with us in a loving way to say, no, there is a path forward. We can do this together, but you have to take a step. And if you're not being confronted with that, you can just dismiss what you're being told.
I would say for women especially too, just having those relationships with other women who are communicating those things is very important. And for women, I think a lot of times we don't place enough value in having those kinds of relationships with other women that are maybe more telling you the hard things, maybe telling you maybe the more difficult things, or pointing that out to you for your life, instead of just kind of being your friend and we have fun together and we do fun things together. But it's having both and having the relationships with other women that are both. And so I think for women especially, that's something that they find when they come to us and are actually in person able to be with women like that, and for the first time have relationships like that and see how important that is for them.
We have conversations a lot about the type of people who lead our programs. And for those that are unfamiliar, when you come to one of our week-long sessions, you're put in a team. And depending on the size of the class, it can be a few teams or several teams. Each team has a team leader, and those team leaders are former students who've gone through a long training process. Some it's a year or more, a long training process that we oversee, and now they're leading the team. And what that means is a class is taught. When the class is done being taught, you go and sit with your team, and in that team of a few folks and your team leader, you are asked questions about the class. You discuss the class. You make application to yourself. And all those things are, helpful and not uncommon, particularly in the church world. It's a small group kind of setting if someone's familiar with the church. What makes those team leaders unique, though, and I think makes this process work so well, is that they are former students. They came through the same process that everyone else came through. They came with the same issues and same challenges that everyone else came through, came with similar backgrounds to the students that they're talking to. And in the process of all of that, they found that hope, and they found some direction, and they made some decisions that maybe weren't easy decisions and required a lot of work, and perhaps even presented some challenges in the relationships, but they're able to communicate to the students that are there from a position of experience. They're communicating truth, but they're also communicating it through the lens of what we're talking about. I applied that to my life, and this is the impact it had. How do students in your experience respond to that? Because I think that's one of the things that can be dismissed if you're not sitting in the same place with someone. How do students respond to that, or what's the impact of that on those who come to the program?
We call it peer-to-peer testimonial-based mentorship.
Sure.
And that's exactly what it is. It's someone who has been where you are, but maybe they're just a few steps ahead of where you are right now. And for us, it's been very impactful.
Yeah.
There's not usually a whole lot of pushback when someone sits in a group with someone else. They're sitting there with other ladies who are kind of experiencing similar things they are right now, being led by someone who has also experienced similar things, but is maybe just a few steps ahead.
Sure.
And so that, like we said, hope, people looking for hope. There's so much hope in that when you look at someone else's life and maybe some decisions that they've made differently since having experienced, for most people, it's a relationship with Christ that they've experienced that. And now because of that are able to now maybe not have no struggles in their life, but they're kind of going through those a little bit of differently and moving forward in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah.
And so there is so much hope that can be found in that for people who are sitting there with someone. And so for us, it's been very impactful. And just having someone lead a team like that. And there's been such a huge difference made in lives when they're able to be encouraged by someone like that.
Yeah, it's very disarming.
It is,
because again, we always fall back on our own experience and the belief that our experience is somehow unique. And the person talking to me can't have any idea what I'm going through or what I've dealt with. Yeah.
Right.
One of the, I think, the more interesting facets of how we organize our programs is that we say and we do serve essentially 3 groups of people, maybe 4 groups of people. Veterans, those who've served in the military. Active duty service members, those who are currently serving in the military. First responders, which is a huge category of folks. Firefighters, police officers, and all of the folks that would fall into that category broadly, emergency services, and spouses. And so when you put all of those things together, you have an interesting mix of person. We do this in both of our programs, in the men's program and in the women's program. We don't segregate out those programs. Now, we do have some first responder sessions that are focused on first responders, but that's because of the number of first responders that are coming to our program now. For years and years, we've included everyone the same. And now in every session, we have veterans, active duty service members, first responders, and spouses. And a lot of times we'll be asked the question, why don't you separate out or segment out those at least 3 categories, if not all 4 categories? Why do you put everyone together, and how do you deal with the many, many different issues and facets of life that those categories of folks would experience? And this is a conversation that we've had, many times. And the question's been asked many times. Thankfully, time has helped us with this because we're far enough down the road now that we can say, well, what we're doing works and people can see that, but that's confusing to folks. Maybe you can talk about that for a little bit. We want to serve all of those folks, but the goal or the end point for all of them is exactly the same. And I think we sometimes miss that. Can you maybe talk about the goal, for a student that comes to the program, regardless of where they come from? What's the goal? What are you trying to get them to?
So we've had that feedback quite a bit, actually, especially as it pertains to our women's program, is why don't we separate it out? Because, we have in our women's program spouses of, first responders, veterans, active duty service members, teaching classes, leading teams, leading within our program, all those things. And so how can that be effective when you have a spouse teaching a class to first responders and veterans, and how does that even work? And so we get that feedback quite a bit as it pertains to our women's program. And so I always like to encourage people to look at what is the goal within our programs. And the goal really is to help people align their lives with the biblical blueprint that we're presenting to them of the woman that God created them to be. And so you might be a first responder, or you might be a veteran, you might even be active duty military at the time that you come to our program. But really, what we're focusing on is to be the person that God created you to be. And that doesn't really have anything to do with the role that you have in life. That doesn't have anything to do with the job that you have. It doesn't really have a whole lot to do with that. It has everything to do with you focusing on and finding your identity in who God created you to be and who God designed you to be. And a lot of times, we kind of find our identity in our role or our job or the title that we have. And so our identity is in that, and that is more focusing on that. That's more focusing on our job or something that we do. It's not so much focused on who God created us to be as a person. As you, as this woman, who did God create for you to be, and what is the purpose that He has for you? And so, so I always let the ladies know, no one can ever take your service away from you. No one can ever take away from you the fact that you have served your country or your community, or even in the aspect of being a spouse to someone like that. No one can take that away from you and that service that you have done for your country and for your community. But we're asking you to consider your life in this different way, and who is the person that God created you to be, and where are you finding that identity? And really, once we explain it like that, it's like, okay, well, I can do that. I can look at my life like that, and it's allowing what you do maybe to be a part of your life, or what you have done in your service to our country or community be a part of your life, but that's not the whole of your life.
And the reason we have instructors that have all of those backgrounds, on the men's side or on the women's side, we have veterans, we have those who are currently serving or have just recently served, maybe they've retired and transitioned out. We have many from the first responder community, and there's a lot of crossover in the first responder community and the veteran community. And spouses, the reason we have all of those representatives is because, again, we don't want anyone to sit there and go, well, that may be true for you and true for your experience, but you've not been where I am, and so you don't really understand what I'm going through. We want to meet people where they are. We want to even address specific issues, and there's no denying that your experience, whether you're a police officer or you're a service member or you're a spouse, your experiences will be different. But the way to move beyond the hurts, the trauma, the trials, the obstacles, is to focus on what you were actually created to do and to be.
And I mean, really, the effectiveness of having, like say a spouse lead a team that has maybe a couple of veterans in it. That spouse is married to, most of the time, a veteran or an active duty service member. And so to have someone sitting on your team that you can identify with maybe from that perspective, and maybe the veteran is a single person and there's a spouse sitting there, leading the team, allowing them to see, okay, this is what it's like to have a relationship with someone who has experienced trauma, or these are some things I've experienced because of, the trauma they've experienced. And that's been very effective and very, impactful too, to allow them to kind of see maybe the bigger picture of things, and maybe to get a little bit of a different perspective. And really just learning, where to find your identity even from that perspective as well.
One of the aspects that you address is the spouse who has found their identity in their spouse's service. And that's really interesting. Sometimes the reason they find their identity there is because their spouse has been hurt, and now they are the ones who are taking care of them. So their identity really is the caregiver to a service member or to a veteran. How do you deal with that? Because a lot of us find our identity in what we're doing right now. I don't think that would be different than parents finding their identity in their small children, and then their kids get big and they're kind of lost in that, or any of us finding our identity in a job that we really care about. How do you address a spouse whose identity is found in caring for a service member or a veteran? How do you have that conversation with someone?
Is really the same as, someone who finds their identity in their job, or, they're finding their identity in the role that's tied up in someone else's hurt or trauma or something. So it's really the same in how we address, the other aspect of it as well, is finding your identity not in that job or the role that you have of taking care of this person, but really looking at yourself as, what is my purpose in life, and what does God have specifically for me to do that doesn't have to do necessarily, this is maybe what I have to do right now, and maybe I'll be doing this for the rest of my life, but that's not where I find my identity. That's not maybe my purpose that God has for me. That's something I do right now, and that's something I might do for a long time, but that's not necessarily my identity or my purpose, or where that should be found. And so it really is just that. And most people that are taking care of someone who's sick or injured don't take the time and this is kind of what we're seeing as well, a lot of the time to stop and have that quiet time where they really are able to introspectively think about, who am I? What am I doing with my life? What direction am I going in? What is my purpose? And so for a lot of women that come to us that are in that situation,
Right.
it's really one of the first times that they've really had time to really think about those things. And so that is very helpful to them to be able to really have some time to think about what really is my purpose, and maybe it's not tied up in this, what I'm doing over here is taking care of this person.
Yeah. The identity piece is something we come back to again and again, and I think it may be the biggest aspect of all of this, is that we need to find our identity in something that is real, something that's eternal, something that doesn't change, instead of in something that has changed. And I always find it fascinating when people find their identity in their trauma. They find their identity in a hurt or a series of hurts. For many people, they've been hurt repeatedly. Something that is devastating in one aspect of their life becomes their identity, and they can't move away from that. Or it's a job, again, that we've talked about that's changed. You and I were just having this conversation about finding your identity in something that doesn't change. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that gives hope?
That can give so much hope because, and this is really a conversation I was able to have even last week during our women's program session, is looking at life more with finding your identity in something or someone that never changes.
Sure.
And really looking at scripture, looking at the Bible and what God has to say about us and the purpose that he has for us in our lives there. And so something that you can be doing in your life right now, a job, something that you're doing, even little kids, if you have little kids at home, that's going to change. Most people don't have the same job for their whole life.
Yeah, right.
That's just the fact. And your kids are not going to stay little forever. So life changes, and your role in life will change, and your jobs will change, and your kids are going to change. And even if you've been married to your spouse for 20 or more years, they're going to change.
Sure.
And your relationship is going to change over time, and the way that looks. And all of those things, life is always changing as we move from phase to phase and life stage to life stage. But something that never changes is the Bible. And God never changes, and the things that he says about us in the Bible never changes. And so really looking to that and aligning your life to that thing that never changes, and in a person, in someone who their opinion of you never changes. And so that, I feel like, is very impactful and hopeful.
Right.
Because for a lot of people, for the first time ever, maybe you can look at life that way. When I look at what God says about me and who he says I am, that will never change, because you can look at that 10 years from now and that will not have changed from what it is today.
Yeah, having your hope in something that isn't based on today, isn't based on a job or the opinions of others, that's where real hope is found. It's outside of my current situation.
Yeah.
And I can deal with my traumas and whatever else. And I think a lot of us get hung up on that. We have folks who come from not only the active duty military side, but more and more from the first responder side. And first responders, again, it's a very broad category, but what it kind of comes down to for us basically is police officers and firefighters, or what we might call emergency service personnel, those who are involved in that. It can be broader than that, but mostly that's what it means. And when you have someone who is working, and they're working day to day or day after day, and they're engaged in this, and for some reason they need to come to a session like ours, and you talk to them about their identity not being in their job, but it being in something that is unchangeable or unmovable. You talk to them about aligning their life to the life God created them to live. And then they graduate at the end of the week, and they go back to work on, we'll say Monday. What does that look like for those folks? We've done this long enough now to know a lot of people who have gone through that transition from, I was working, I was struggling, I came to a program, I went back to work. How do they apply those principles of life to the job that they go back to?
One of the things that we usually tell the students kind of more at the end of the week is just letting them know, the things that you left at home when you came here, they're still going to be there when you go home. But hopefully you'll have received the tools to be able to now address them in a little bit of a different way. And so that's a lot of times the feedback that we get, from people that go right back into the situations that they left, go right back into the job that maybe is so difficult or causes so much, maybe them to be faced with so much trauma on a daily basis, especially when you're talking about the first responder community and the things that they're dealing with on a daily basis. But it's not that those things aren't there, or you're not going to have to deal with those things. But the feedback that we get a lot of the time is, for the first time ever, I feel like I have the tools now to be able to respond to those things differently, or come out on the other side of those things a little bit differently. It all still looks the same. The trauma still looks the same.
Right.
The horrible things that you're faced with in life still look the same. But looking at it through a different lens and with a different perspective, that's what makes all the difference.
Yeah. What is the process after a program? A person comes to the program, they graduate, and they're going to go back to that thing. Whatever was there before they came, they're going to go back to that. What is the process of support following a session? We do a lot of these, but following a session, what can someone expect?
So we have a mentor, really, as part of every one of our sessions. That's a woman that comes, and she's there for support, for the ladies, and just to be able to maybe speak one-on-one with them. And what a woman can expect when she leaves is for that mentor to reach out to all the ladies with some helpful verses, really some like printable cards that they can print off and have those encouragements with them. We also put some resources into their hands as well, some book resources, and they will receive lists of resources as well from the mentor. And then they have their team leader who they have been with that whole week, and our team leaders will keep in touch with the ladies in their group. A lot of times they'll form a maybe like a text group or a messaging group where they all can communicate with each other, and our team leaders do a really good job of keeping those ladies connected and even staying in touch with them for quite a while after a program, and just making sure that the transition to home has gone well and has gone smoothly, and just having for a time after weekly check-ins with them, with individuals on their team or with the whole team as a whole. And then we have ladies who have connected individually. And a lot of times that will happen where they're keeping in touch with each other after a program, and just really forming that bond and that friendship where they're able to hold each other accountable as well. And so sometimes that just happens organically as well. But our process is through the mentor, through the team leader, and just through the ladies that they met on their team, to stay connected, really closely connected for several weeks after the program, for accountability and connection, and just making sure that the transition to home has gone well.
Yeah. I think one of the fears people have is, I finally found my people. I found my group. I have hope for the first time. And then there's a fear of, now I'm going to be out on my own again. I'm trying to prevent that.
It's when we do really try to prevent that. And really we let the ladies know before they leave us too, is to be intentional about keeping those relationships. And if you're struggling and if you're having a hard time, then make sure you're reaching out, because no one can guess that you're having a hard time. And so, it really is nice when someone reaches out and says, hey, are you okay? But if you're not okay, to be the one that reaches out and is intentional about asking for that help, asking for someone to come alongside you or even have that conversation with you over the phone.
Yeah, that's good. Your background, I know pretty well because we've known each other for a little while now. So when we met in college, we got married. I was in the Marine Corps then, and you were a Marine spouse, a couple of deployments, combat deployment. We went into ministry. You've been involved. So on the military side, you've then been involved in church ministry, and now with the work of Mighty Oaks. And I would imagine there are a lot of things that you've seen in each one of those places that aren't different, and maybe some lessons that you've learned in each one of those, or that you've learned by helping women more specifically through Mighty Oaks, that you would turn around and go back to the ladies in the church, or those who haven't been to our program but are married to someone who's serving. Some of the lessons that kind of transcend whether or not you're a veteran or a service member or whatever. For people who are listening or watching this that would say, that's great, but that doesn't apply to me. What are some things that you would say apply generally, maybe to all people or maybe just to women generally? Some lessons that you've learned that women, you need to know this. You need to understand this.
That's good. tricky question.
I know there are a lot of things that you say. People just need to understand this, or women need to know this. And this isn't about where you served or what you did. This is about, being a woman. Maybe it's, in your role in a world that's changing. Here are some things you need to hang on to.
Yeah. I would say probably a few things that I would say is maybe a couple of things that we've already talked about is finding your identity in the right place and finding your worth in the right place. And I think that is huge. And that's something that I'm still learning. That's something that I'm still working on. And really going back to that all the time and not allowing your mind to tell you otherwise, and not allowing thoughts to come in that don't line up with who God says you are, and who he says, how much he says you're worth, and what your identity is in him, and not allowing those thoughts to take over. One of my favorite verses, and I could not tell you the reference right now, but is the verse in the Bible that says, take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, and that is something that I love, because that speaks to that. Is when a thought comes in your mind that does not line up with Scripture and that does not line up with who God says you are, is to take that captive and really put it away and set it aside, because that does not line up with who God says you are. And I would say that is huge, and that's something that I wish I had known or even thought to make so important in my life, way back when we first met even. And the other thing too is finding the importance and the value in having a group of women around you, not just friends. For me personally, I've always been someone that just has a few really close friends. I'm not someone that has a lot of people that I call my friends, just a smaller community of people that I would call that. But maybe finding the value more in that, or realizing how important that is, because there was a time in my life I didn't have that, because I wasn't intentional about it. And so I think just knowing, or even learning the value of that a long time ago, and being intentional about having those relationships in my life that I mentioned, that is people that are not just your friends that you can do fun things with, because there's some very shallow relationships that you can have. As a woman, we're really good about being fake and not being true about ourselves or honest about ourselves, not allowing people to really get to know us for who we are. And it could be really easy to have shallow relationships with a lot of people. But having those true, honest, open relationships with a few people, even if it's just one person or two people, that's fine. But for me, I wish I had learned that a long time ago. And I've learned that over time, is how important and valuable those relationships are. And then I would say even more recently, I've been so much more okay with, if there's a woman that I see at church, or even, within our programs, or our programs team even, that I know is having a hard time, because you can just tell that when they say, I'm good, how are you? That they're not really good. Is being more bold about saying, like, hey, like, I know everything's not okay. Like, are you okay? Do you need someone to talk to? Can I take some time with you right now, or this week, or whatever? And just being more like that for other women. And I have really learned just the value in that as well. And that sometimes someone just needs something to say, I know you're not okay, or someone to say, I know you're not okay. And I know that because I know you, and I've seen you when you are okay. And this doesn't line up with that. And so sometimes, when you see someone just casually, even at church, you saying, hey, you don't seem okay. That can speak volumes to them, and that might just be exactly what they need at that time. And so those are some things I wish I had, maybe that I have known now, that I wish maybe I had known a long time ago, but that I feel like for me now in my life have brought so much value and so much help and so much encouragement to me in my life of where I am right now.
I think that the last several years of working with those who would attend our program, with those in the veteran community and the first responder community, men and women who have struggled so much, and not everyone who attends our program struggles a lot. I always say that, because everyone is welcome. If you fall into one of those categories, you're welcome to attend our program. You'll get something out of it. You'll grow and you'll learn. But a lot of the people who do attend have really, really struggled. And I hear so many testimonies and so many conversations where people say things like, I wish I had known this before, or I wish I had done something different when I was much younger, or if I had made other decisions at some point in my life, I wouldn't be here today. And you hear those things, and when you have kids, it's more than just an interesting conversation. Because as a dad, and you and I talk about this about our kids all the time. We've got 2 boys and 2 girls. What can we do to help them make better decisions today, so that they don't find themselves in the same position as a lot of the folks that honestly we're blessed to work with. You can't control the decisions that people make. People make their own decisions, and even good kids from good homes make dumb decisions and end up needing help. I get that, but you as a mom, having again seen, being a woman from different positions, as a young woman, as a young mom, working with military people, working in a church. When you look at our daughters, we have a 21-year-old and 11-year-old, and you're a great mom and you invest a lot of time in our kids, what are some things that you're more intentional about with them now than you would have been if you weren't exposed to so many of the the conflicts and the friction points that the ladies you're now working with are dealing with? What are some things that you're more intentional about now to kind of inoculate them to some of these other things that might happen?
I feel like we keep talking about this over and over again, but the number one thing really is talking to them constantly about not finding your value in a person or a thing. Right now, most of the time, it's a person. I'm constantly communicating to them whether or not you get this job or whether or not you get this position in your life. That doesn't say anything about you. That does not say if you find your worth in who God created you to be and who God says you are. Then if this person doesn't like you for that, that's okay.
Yeah.
It is fine. Right. Not finding your worth or your value in who someone says you are, or in a person,
right.
Or in a position, that's okay. As long as you are being the person that you're supposed to be and you're living according to the purpose that God has made for you.
Yeah.
And I would say that's the biggest thing that right now I really try to communicate to them. And really from personal experience, also sharing with them some things that I experienced, because I did not do that when I was their age. And some things that I wish, maybe some decisions I wish I had made differently, or some things that I had done differently. Maybe I wish I had been differently in relationships because I did not understand the importance of that. And so that would be the biggest thing that now I'm communicating with them, is really finding your worth in that. And then even just how to be in relationships. That's the biggest thing. Family relationships, relationships with other people outside of our family, how to be the person that you're supposed to be in those relationships, and maybe some things I wish I had done differently. Because really, honestly, when people say that they have regrets about things or wish they had done things differently, most of the time it has to do with another person, a relationship that they wish they had. If I had only known this, or if I had only maybe not been so selfish, or if I had only, then this relationship could be so much more than it is now.
Right.
And you can't control other people's decisions, and you can't control how other people are. But sometimes, always, there's two sides to every story. And a lot of times, there's some personal regrets that we have of how we handled that situation, or that fight, or that disagreement.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we have regrets in life, it has to do with the relationship with, our kids or our spouse. And that's a lot of times, what we're seeing, even with the women that we're working with on our program side, is that we have regrets. And a lot of times it has to do with the way that we handled a situation. Like I said, some people, we can't control things that other people do and decisions that other people make, and the way that they hurt us. We cannot control that. But sometimes, a lot of times, maybe there's none of that. There's no hurt, but there's just a relationship that has fizzled out, or a broken relationship that is just because maybe we didn't put as much into it. Yeah. Maybe because we didn't find our worth in the right place, and we did not see the value that we had to God. And so we acted in a way that maybe we shouldn't have in that relationship. Yeah. And so that's what I try to communicate really to our girls, is finding your worth in who God says you are, not in a position or a person, and then just in the relationships that you're in with everyone in your life, is to being the person that you're supposed to be, not being selfish, but looking out for the good of other people. And really, those are really communicating that to them from personal experience.
And that's what resiliency is about. When we talk about being resilient, really what we're talking about is having the ability to bounce back when you get knocked down to a predetermined point. Mm-hmm. And for us, we'd say that predetermined point is understanding who God created you to be. It's moving toward that. And so regardless of what happens in relationships or in life, or what people do to you or say to you, you might have to deal with those hurts, certainly, but you're resilient because you can bounce back and understand those things happened to me, or were said to me. I had to experience those things, but those are not who I am. Mm-hmm. They're just things that now I have to deal with. Mm-hmm. And man, to find resilient people, to see people who you look at and go, I don't know how they lived through that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they exist and how they function and they're purposeful and they're making things happen. It's because they determined probably long before those events happened that their worth, their identity is not tied up in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's in something else, and they can move toward that.
Mm-hmm. And that can really cause someone to go a long way in life. Really, when you're saying, people look at some people that have experienced horrible things and wonder how can they have made it through that. And really, for most people, it's because of that. It's because they have decided ahead of time, this is how I'm going to handle that, and just communicating that to the next generation. And really, that's like you asked, that's what I'm trying to communicate, to our girls, right. And really to any younger people that would listen or that have the opportunity to talk to, is communicating that to them, is being resilient in that way and deciding ahead of time, even if this relationship falls apart, even if I don't get that job, even if I don't accomplish this, get this position that I'm hoping for in life, that it's okay because I'm finding my worth in this and I'm deciding ahead of time how I'm going to handle those situations in life.
That's great. For those who are interested in attending or pushing a loved one into attending the women's program, who's eligible? We've said it several times, but who's eligible and how do they connect with us to get set up to come to a program?
Who's eligible is if you are a first responder, active duty service member, if you're a veteran, or a spouse of any of those, you are eligible to attend our programs. And then, just go to our website, mightyoaksprograms.org, and there's an application kind of link there, and you can follow that to get to a women's program application and fill that out. And then someone from our team will be connecting with you, and we'll kind of get that process started.
Yeah, and we have a lot of programs throughout the year, so there's always one coming up, and we'll do our best to get you into one. Our women's program is our most in-demand program right now, so it may be a few sessions before we can sign you up, but if you're in a rough spot right now and you need help right now, fill out the application, let us know that, and we will do everything we can to accommodate getting you into a program as quickly as possible. And even if you can't get right into a session, we'll connect with you and help you through that process. And we say this a lot, but the program itself doesn't cost anything. That week with us is something that our donors have been so faithful to support, and we're able to provide for you. We don't want that to be an obstacle. And travel, we have our sessions happen all over the country. We will cover the cost of travel to get you there so you can get the help that you need. And ours is not the only program in the world. I think we can all acknowledge that and understand that. And maybe you don't fall into one of those categories, but you need help, and so much of what you hear resonates with you. A lot of the resources that we provide are free. Our books, we sell them on our website, but if you absolutely need one and can't afford it, send us an email, we'll give it to you. We want you to have the help that you need. Our YouTube channel, of course, tons of resources that you can get today, and we'd love to help you that way. But whatever the case, wherever you find yourself in life, don't let the fear of you're the only one, no one understands, I can't get help. There is help and there is hope. Don't let fear prevent you from getting that. And on the other side, you'll be very, very glad that you did. Thank you.
Thank you
for joining me today.
Yes.
I really appreciate it. All right, you did a good job.
So did you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. For those of you that are listening, thank you for listening. And again, take some time later. We're at the end. So in just a minute, to jump over to YouTube, you can go find our channel, Mighty Oaks Programs. Search for it. You'll find our channel. Subscribe. Hit the notification bell, and look at all the other content that we have there. Send this out to folks that you know that need it, and I'm sure you know some folks who could benefit from it. Other resources there for you as well. Again, thank you. We will talk to you next week.